I discovered all the billionaires, in truth, have no clue how they became billionaires. They've got no roadmap. I've discovered, forget everything they say, because you cannot explain an experience. You can't put in a book the nuances of shifting and making decisions on the move, the instinct of responding to certain things. There's no way to capture this in book. That's why people will read all their books, and I've not met anybody who read billionaires' books and became a billionaire. I've not met anybody. And I've met guys who've read all the books, and they've still not made any money, because it's not capturable in text. It is cut into you in the process.
Yeah.
In the journey.
You really become tailor-made.
Yes.
Hello and welcome to Unlock the Kingdom Within You. This podcast explores the profound truth about what it means to be born into the kingdom, not a religion. On this podcast, we challenge the religious and denominational norms which shackle us from expressing the liberty of Christ by exploring the kingdom, the Ekklesia, and citizenship. If you're born into the kingdom but lost in religion, then this channel is just for you. So thank you for listening, and don't forget to subscribe.
Meanwhile, it's the other way around. Your heart is in the right place. You've heard the call. You've been sent. The rest will be worked out in the process. The challenges, the navigations, the structures, that's where it's built on. I mean, Fred, you and I know that the sum total of challenges equal the realities we are working now, not the sum total of knowledge.
Yes. Yeah.
It's not. I tell people, believe me, revelation is easy. It's a gift. God gives it to us.
Yeah.
God unlocks scripture and allows us to see. But that's very different from application.
Yeah.
Where you begin to walk into the spaces. I said, look at David, a man after God's own heart. If you follow his conversations, you'd almost wonder, what is he talking about? There are scenarios of doubt. There are scenarios of query. There are scenarios of crying out. But in all that, it built him up to be that distinct king from whose throne remains forever. And that's the pattern. That's the reality. I always say, part of the problem with Solomon, zero challenge.
Yeah, true. Time of rest, isn't it?
Yes.
And the danger in rest is allying with other princesses and which creates the problem.
Exactly.
I guess it goes back to like with David, where it says when kings were at war, he wasn't.
He stayed home. And that's a problem. And that's exactly the problem. So I think that becomes very crucial. And when you're being called out, I think we have romanticized the calling out. And not realize that the calling out is usually a challenge that comes out of hesitation, a lot of query, a lot of, God, are you sure you will be with me?
Yeah.
Not the arrogant, I am sent and therefore I come. You know, and I use Moses as the most classic example. I usually like the narrative at the burning bush because God kind of plays around with Moses in the sense that God talks about all the stuff he's going to do. And it sounds great. Until he turns it around and tells Moses, no, you're going to do that. And then the debate begins. As long as God was going to do it, Moses was happy about it. When God says, oh, everything I've actually said, I'm sending you to do. And suddenly Moses has all these excuses. And that's, to me, the best picture of sending. Of being called out and being sent, because that's where the debate is. That's where the query is. And Moses didn't walk into Egypt into a walkover.
No, exactly.
Pharaoh didn't roll over and play dead.
Well, in fact, and you have to consider that the hardest part for him was facing up to the eldership in Israel, the princes and the elders in Israel, who the familiar who weren't going to believe him.
Exactly. He ran away. He abandoned them. He has criminal charges up against him. He's a wanted man. Really? Are you the sent one?
It's funny, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I guess this is the thing, because this feeds into this idea of the type of environment that, I talked about this what did I say earlier? Social engineering. The idea of saying, okay, what is the outcome that the Lord wants to achieve, and what's the appropriate environment that's going to help to nurture that? That is not going to resist the life class, but rather is going to recognize that its goal is to help tuition and support and mentor through the life class.
Go
ahead. No, go ahead.
No, I was going to say that when you mention that reality, that the coming out of that journey and the life class that it produces, I'm currently looking at Joseph post the famine, and looking at the quality he brings to Egypt that was forged in slavery, was forged in Potiphar's house, was forged in prison, and how that combines to bring the wisdom of managing and stewarding the affairs of Egypt post the famine. See, we kind of like stopping at the famine and him having a solution, and that's it. But we forget the replenishing of Egypt. We forget the replanting. We forget the mechanisms he put in place. I'm beginning to look at that story to see the distinction that goes beyond the profundity of interpreting a dream properly and having a solution. What next? And that's what comes to mind when you talk about the class distinction of functioning. That new dynamic.
But we see that in society. We know that some of the wealthiest men on the earth did not take the usual class route in their societies, in their city-states.
Yes.
In other words, in order to become distinct and unique and set apart, there is often a tuition in life that is both amongst the people but very unique from the people.
Yes.
And that's one of the reasons why I enjoy my son and I enjoy watching documentaries about billionaires.
Yes.
We've just finished a series on Prime. My son's going for it, but I finished it about billionaires and specifically tech billionaires.
Which one's that? I want to look it up. No, that's
it's just called I think it's just called Billionaires. If you look on Prime, you'll see it there. It's on Prime. So it's Elon Musk. It's it's gone from me now. It's Amazon, Jeff Bezos.
Yes.
It's looking at Mark Zuckerberg, Facebook, and it's also looking at the guys that invented and set up Google. But I think what it's interesting is it's really looking at how their technology manifests who they are and who they became as a result of that unique discovery and journey. And that is looking at the flaws and all, so everything.
Yes, that's lovely.
Yeah, go ahead.
You're saying about
I say so for me, I'm looking at these men who really have crossed the threshold in not so much in terms of money, even though it's called billionaires, but rather it's this idea of crossing a threshold of productivity and influence. And looking at the level of distinction that afforded them that capability, which was driven by a process that was so unique.
Yes.
A mind that had to be carved out in such a way that, for example, when the Lord talks to the prophet and says to him, you'll have a mind as flint, in terms of unswaving in terms of in your directive, is that kind of what is the Lord doing within the context of the Ekklesia, kingdom, Ekklesia, and citizenship to create such a distinction in the earth that will be classified as a separate class of people because of what they bring into the earth that is essentially transcends what is known now and really reflects what Paul talks about in terms of the powers of the age to come.
I believe that's what we are supposed to be looking at and trying to attain to now. In other words, our processes, if they don't bring us to that place, they were not worth it. The journeys, the trauma, the mistakes, if they don't bring us there, then we've actually missed the assignment, so to speak. And then I said this for a number of reasons. I have a friend who was a billionaire, sadly passed on about a year ago. We got to be friends over a period of almost 1.5 years, divinely arranged, and we had this odd relationship, very odd relationship. I was his friend, everybody else was his acquaintance, his business partner, and so on. And all that happened is that we would have conversations, we'd talk and talk. And initially, when I was about to be introduced to him, I didn't want to, because the stories I'd had about him, the possibility of womanizing and stuff like that, I just resisted it. But there's this friend of ours who insisted, the way the two of your brains work, you need to meet. And so they made the arrangement. And even in our first encounter, he basically was very gruff. He said, "So what do you want?" And I was like, "What do I want?" That's not what this is about. Somebody thinks me and you should meet, and you think I want something? That was my attitude. But the strange thing, he said, "Look, you've got 5 minutes." That 5 minutes, that particular day, changed into 5 hours. And he basically cleared his desk and didn't have another meeting. And we hit off and we began to talk about everything. And all he would do, according to him, would pick my mind and say, "What do you think about this?" I didn't then understand that God was beginning to show me that the sharpness of kingdom reality is relevant in Babylon. And that it's applicable. You'd ask very basic questions about certain businesses. "What do you think about this?" And I'd just give my opinion. And he literally would make decisions around it. It became so profound that his CEOs would run stuff through me before they presented them to him. Literally, because they felt, if I think it's going to pass, it will pass. But then I began to study him, because I felt God was deliberately had me around him for a reason. And I discovered that his profoundest gift was people, not money. He could read people in 5 minutes. That was his gift. That was his real gift. He would sit in a meeting, and in 5 minutes of your pitch, he'd made up his mind whether he was going to invest with you or not. That was it. And he had the lowest staff turnover in this nation. Half the guys who worked for him had worked with him for years. And he wasn't the most pleasant gentleman. He wasn't Mr. Nice. He was very cut, very specific. He didn't mince words. And he told you what was on his mind. And oddly, he was a genius with people. Now, there's nowhere you're taught to read people.
Yeah.
It's something that grows on you through time. And so that just became the thing. I began to watch him. And I could tell after some time. I could tell if someone's pitch was going to work or not, just by observing it. I could tell by his body language whether it had made sense or not. And he was an elderly man. I mean, he could sometimes sleep through your presentation, but he's listening. This gift, I do not understand it. I tell guys, don't stop, keep on. And when you're done, he'd wake up and he'd poke through things what you said, and you thought he was asleep. Just a genius in that context. Now, having said that, the other side of the coin is this. I discovered all the billionaires, in truth, have no clue how they became billionaires. They've got no roadmap. I've discovered, forget everything they say, because you cannot explain an experience. You can't put in a book the nuances of shifting and making decisions on the move, the instinct of responding to certain things. There's no way to capture this in books. That's why people will read all their books, and I've not met anybody who read billionaires' books and became a billionaire. I've not met anybody. And I've met guys who've read all the books, and they've still not made any money, because it's not capturable in text. Like what you're saying, it is cut into you in the process.
Yeah.
In the journey.
You really become tailor-made.
Yes. And so there's no way that you can replicate the circumstances, the relationships, the historical timing, the opportunities, and how some people are very quick at seeing what you can't see, even when it's in front of you.
Yeah.
And how caught in a critical moment, what drives them to make one decision and not the other.
Yeah.
So it's a custom-made process.
Mm.
And so it's the same as a calling. Like you said, if you think carefully, they are set apart in a context of a journey and a process. And so I believe it's the same way with the way God is setting up distinguished Ekklesia people. The current processes are creating something that's going to be so valuable down the road. Well, when we say that there'll be Josephs behind Pharaohs and Daniels behind Nebuchadnezzar, it sounds like a nice cliche statement. We forget Daniel was a captive. It sounds like he had this great CV and he went over to Pharaoh and said to Nebuchadnezzar and said, you know what, I've got a solution.
Well, clearly, you know, Nebuchadnezzar found him on LinkedIn, isn't it?
That's what we all assume.
He just reached out to him and said, look, I've got an opportunity for you. It seems like your skill set matches.
We need you here, man. None of these guys came willingly.
Yeah.
None of these guys intended to arrive where they were arriving. But
it's also something else that you raised earlier, which I picked up on through the study of Matthew, which is the idea about our distinction within the context of being called out is served within the capacity of the failure of the nation states.
Absolutely.
And that for me, you know, one of the things I'd written a while ago is, you know, about the fact that, look, Jesus comes at a time, the kairos of him coming in the fullness of time was when we saw both Israel as a nation failing and Rome failing. The Jew and the Gentile nation states were at their end. It didn't matter that one was occupying the other.
Yep.
The reality is they both were at their end of their period of time.
Yes.
And so the kingdom emerges within the context of city-states failing, and the people that are part of the emergence, that are the solutions at that time, they are made distinct because they have been failed by those two systems.
There you go. I mean, it's funny you say that because when COVID happened, as usual, you know, the church as we know it, we are post-crisis prophets, not pre-crisis prophets. You know, that's just how we are. We rarely see the crisis coming. But after it comes, we have got all these prophetic insights.
We'll explain the detail that we discovered within it. And we'll everybody, everyone will look at us and go, "Oh, that was great," and that was wonderful," because we've unpacked it and we've surgically determined why God did what He did.
But we didn't see it coming. Well, that's the most amusing part of that. So when that was going on, all sorts of queries came up about what do we think is going on, blah blah blah. And I said, look, this is not about the prophetic. This is about discernment. It's about looking in, using a background knowledge of God. The understanding that there is no crisis in God's kingdom. There's only crisis in the earth. And if we're to follow scripture, crisis is always an outcome of a shaking. So God shakes stuff, and the stuff manifests as crises. So that's the first reality. If we start there, it's clearer than if we think the devil has got this thing going. So I said, once we understand that, the first thing that is removed is the eschatology of escape. The end has arrived.
You mean we can't go to heaven?
Nah, not with COVID. Nah, the guys who are exiting already did. They're still there. So I said, the proper analysis is this, and that dovetails exactly into what you're saying. That the picture of crisis every time in scripture has got a dual reality. There's always a two-window factor within the same moment. I said, when Egypt was experiencing crisis, Israel was experiencing deliverance. So the issue is, where are you located? So if you're experiencing crisis, we better change your location.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're in the wrong story here. Because as far as an Egyptian was concerned, the greatest calamities they've ever imagined was on them.
Yeah.
But to the Jews, the greatest deliverance they've ever imagined was on them. The events were exactly the same. So I said, so if you look at COVID properly, you see a reset button for the kingdom. You see God leveling the playing field.
Yeah.
You see God creating a window of opportunity for the emergence of the Ekklesia. If you see crisis, you live in Egypt.
Yeah. And it's interesting, isn't it, that you can imagine that for those that are on the journey in terms of developing the Ekklesia, I don't know about you, for me, there wasn't much of an adjustment. It
Absolutely.
was, we'd already put certain things in place.
Exactly.
We didn't have that prophetic insight that this was coming.
We just did.
And so, but when it was emerged, we'd already been positioned to navigate through it.
In fact, for me, that was the issue. The issue was so interesting that, and I'll give you a specific story. Prior to COVID, we were having physical meetings. Prior to COVID, we had gotten onto a certain national channel where they would come and record and broadcast us. And two things began to happen. The first thing is that I felt a leading from God that we need to get our own broadcast equipment. Right? No inkling on why. Just this is what needs to be done. And the reasoning was this, that as long as they record us, they have the rights to the content. And therefore, they would go and split it into whatever pieces they want. So they kind of forced how I recorded. I would kind of start a session. Those days where I would do kind of long sessions, 1.5 hours. So they would do an hour, which means I would have to think in my head that I have to kind of taper off now, because then the broadcast will go off here and then continue. But the content was theirs to do what they want with. So I changed the model. I got equipment and said, now we will record and give you the content. It's our content. So it began like that. We then began live streaming, because we met on a Wednesday night, 8 p.m., not on a Sunday morning. That was already disruptive anyway. So not everybody could make it to the meeting, but then if we could do that, that worked for us. Now, I was in New York 2020, January. Roundabout, I didn't know that was the epicenter. Stuff was happening. So as I arrived in Nairobi, I actually tell people, I remember getting fever and stuff. I probably got COVID, but I had no clue that's what it was. Good thing I didn't know what it was, so I recovered and life went on. But as the stories began to unfold, and I began to sense this is God, I said, guys, no more meeting. I'm not going to endanger anybody. I said, it's not about faith. I can't vouch for your faith. There's all sorts of, and then we didn't know just how serious, how do you get contaminated. There was all sorts of speculation, all sorts of fears, everything. So we basically said, guys, we're not going to meet physically again. We're going online, fully online. So we began to broadcast online, and we got all sorts of flack. How do you have church online? Oh, you know, those stuff, no impartation. People have to be present in the room. All sorts of stories. So we stayed online. 2-3 months later, government banned all church meetings. We had been online for 3 months. Everybody had gotten used to it. It was a norm. We didn't miss a skip. We didn't miss a heartbeat. Ministries began scrambling, learning how to get online, getting cameras. How do you record? What do you do? In fact, we had to do consultancy for some ministries on how to get online. Suddenly, everybody was getting on the bandwagon that was normal. So just like he said, God didn't tell us COVID is on the way. We're going to close churches. That's not how it came. It basically said, start this. And the strange thing, post-COVID, we never went back. Because the level of impact we began to have was way more practical, more measurable, and we reached out much wider to nations we'd never have touched if we had stayed physical. So it just became a natural morphing to a new reality. The crisis expanded our territories, changed our model, got us functioning from a new space. Now, when we do get to meet physically, it's for specific reasons. To do specific things, not on a regular basis, but with practical reasons to meet. And they have more impact, more effect by far. So I believe the crisis in the nations now is totally the best opportunity for our emergence. Absolutely. I mean, you open every single channel. No single nation is having it easy. None. And I believe the only nation having it easy is called Ekklesia.
God's people.
God's people are fine. We're doing great. We're thriving.
I think, that's the reality. So I'm gonna close on this last question for you, because we've had a wonderful podcast. So I've enjoyed it. I didn't expect it. It's so far 2 hours and 30 minutes. I just hope it's recorded well. It's been good though. It's been very good. I mean, I definitely want to have other conversations with you about tech, about sort of stuff that's going on. One thing we're not doing in our collaboration group enough is talking about the World Economic Forum.
I think we need to
and I think we definitely need to. I think I'm trying to do it with a small cohort that I have, trying to begin to have that conversation, because I think there needs to be a very keen eye watching that. And its entanglements across nation states, which are massive.
Thank you for joining our fireside talk about the kingdom. My name is Frederick Tobun, and I hope this podcast has been a blessing to you. If you'd like to continue to receive fresh insight into the kingdom, click the notification bell to follow us. For further information about the kingdom, visit our website www.unlockthekingdomwithinyou.com to download your free ebook. See you soon.